You're tuned in to the Vintage House Show, home to the original stories of the history of house music as told by the legends, pioneers, and icons. Hosted by Kevin Mega McFall, Lori Branch, and Lauren Lowry.
House music. This panel discussion is entitled House Preservation, Cultivating the Next Generation of Practitioners. And so that is important. I mean, there's so many music genres that sort of that become obsolete after a while. And certainly in Chicago, blues used to be everything in Chicago. There's only a few clubs. House music used to be everything in Chicago. There's very few clubs. But we're going to talk today about some of the mentoring and some of the things that have happened technologically that has changed how music is sort of moving from one generation to the other. My name again is Lauren Lowry. I am the Chief Archivist and co-founder of the Modern Dance Music Research and Archiving Foundation. We are the only repository in the United States dedicated solely to the preservation and celebration of house music and dance music genres. I am also a DJ at WNUR 89.3 FM, the Street Beat Show. My show is co-hosted with DJ Lori Branch, one of house music's women pioneers, and our show is called Vintage House. Every other Wednesday, 10 o'clock, 10 until 11, we interview house music pioneers. We talk to them about the past and we talk to them about the future of house music. There are a couple of flyers on the desk below and my card, so you're welcome to check that out. I'm going to start. We're going to bring Craig Loftis in. This is house music history walking in right now, so he is critical for this conversation. Someone's going to mic you up, I hope. Or maybe someone can help him get mic'd up.
Sorry.
So, David gave us some guidelines for this, and I'll tell you one of them. He said this panel will look back at the history of the genre, ongoing gender inequality, evolving technologies and industry trends to inform the possible future of house music as a cultural practice. I normally like to start everything I do with history, and this may seem somewhat foreign to you, but I'm going to tell you a couple of very important facts. Certainly as a historian, these are very important facts. Black people were the only people in the United States ever explicitly forbidden to become literate. Along those lines, enslaved people of African descent were also forbidden to play drums. What about the possibility of creating a beat, funk music, disco, and what we're talking about right now? The preservation of music forms, Chicago music, is extremely important to me and should be important to everyone here if you love the music. So we're going to talk to each one of these panelists about their idea about preserving the music, what they're doing right now to mentor youth, what the youth think about what the house music community in Chicago is doing to ensure that they are able to move the music forward. Do they think there's a problem? Maybe they don't. They feel mentored. But we're going to hear from each of them today about their thoughts on house music preservation. We are going to begin with history and talk to Craig Loftis about his experience in house music. But then we're going to talk to somebody else. We're going to interplay the young and the old on this panel. So we have a very diverse group of people on this panel. We are going to, towards the end of this conversation, allow you, the audience, to ask a few questions. And of course, they are not racing off the stage, so if your question is not able to be answered, even though there's a few of us here, certainly they will be able to talk to you one-on-one about what they're doing. And number 3, what we're also going to do is make sure that you all have information and something that you can do to share with youth about how you can get involved in the house music movement. Young and old can be involved. And there are a couple of really fantastic panelists here that are doing fantastic things to move the music forward, and I'll let them discuss exactly what those things are themselves. So again, we're going to begin with history. Craig Loftis. Craig Loftis is a South Sider. Craig Loftis went to Willowbroad Catholic. Chicago, you have to start with the high schools. In Chicago, they don't care if you went to Oxford University. They don't care if you're the bank chairman. The first question is where you went to high school. So Craig Loftis went to Willowbroad.
Yes, Willowbroad.
And then also went to Lewis University, and then found himself, like many of these panelists, at Columbia College, with a degree in sound engineering, arts, and communication. Craig Loftis was mentored by the greats, DJ Craig Cannon, DJ Frankie Knuckles, and he has played at some of the most iconic clubs in the city. Certainly, he played at the Power Plant, he's played at the Loft, he's played at many other fantastic places, including the Music Box. So Craig, talk to me quickly about your experience as a young person in house music, how you were mentored, and just quickly, is that same thing happening today in your viewpoint?
Well, first we'll go back to when I was first getting into house music. Frankie Knuckles was one of my main mentors. Craig Cannon actually gave me my first start as a DJ. Back then we were doing a lot of high school parties, and that's when the house movement was really just taking its roots. My group, what we were trying to do, we were sneaking into the warehouse where Frankie was playing back in the day, and what we tried to do was imitate what we saw, bring what we saw from the warehouse and that type of thing back to the south side of Chicago, and we were doing parties at the Loft. That, I would say, is the first step of our mentoring, because we were imitating what we saw Frankie, Robert Williams, and all those guys do in their design, the way they presented the parties and everything. And we knew that a lot of people would not be experiencing the warehouse and things like that because it was a gay club. So we brought it to the straight kids, you know. So it was back then, it was like hot. Everything was real chic, you know. That was our first sign of my first experience with mentoring. My second experience was after I got to know Frankie. I became his sound engineer at the power plant, and one night, this is him mentoring me as a DJ. Frankie had a way of making people enjoy music. You know, it was just phenomenal the way he would do things. So one day he told me, I'm going to teach you something, and this is like a direct mentoring. A lot of the other mentoring has been, you know, like, I wouldn't say just so direct, it's just being associated with someone. Well, this was a direct teaching. There was a song out called Ice Cream Capsules by The Time. I don't know if you all remember that song. I couldn't stand that record when it first came out. But this is one of the lessons that Frankie taught me. He heard something in this record, and he knew that it could be really big. So he showed me his steps as a DJ. I'll make it real quick. So what he did was, one night, he said, I'm going to show you something. He said, in 3 weeks, he said, no, in 4 weeks, I'm going to make these kids scream at this record. Because the first night he played it, the whole dance floor cleared, right? So what he did was, he played 4 songs that were like the high energy songs that they loved. He brought in Ice Cream Capsules. Floor cleared. Second week, did the same thing, but this time he followed Ice Cream Capsules with another song that they really, really loved. Third week, same thing. Fourth week, he played Ice Cream Capsules, the room went crazy. So that was one of my experiences as being mentored as a DJ.
Gotcha. We're going to stick with a little bit of history here. So I'm going to go to Davy Dave. Davy Dave is what I consider kind of a late 80s, early 90s DJ and promoter, which is a little different. Promoting the music, promoting events, that kind of thing. That's kind of, I think, unique and interesting. But Davy Dave's got quite a different sort of experience. Davy Dave was born in Kiev, from Kiev to the north side of Chicago, to the north suburbs of Chicago, and is a house head. I always love to see how people found themselves from different parts of the city and the world to house music. He's played at Lollapalooza. He was DJing at the age of 12, throwing rave parties at the age of 17. That is really interesting to someone like me who couldn't leave the house at age 12. So at 17, he's at the party, going to party, getting the party going. He's also went to Hershey High School, went to Columbia College. He majored also in sound engineering, but also music and business management. One of the things that I'm taken with your story is that you talk a little bit about sort of had you known that sound engineering would become extinct to a certain degree, you would have thought differently about your major. And so I want to talk to you quickly about how do you think this, given technology changes, how is that changing how people like you and people like Craig are able to mentor others? If there's no record studio, if people are not going to the record studio, how are we able to then sort of reach back out? How are things changing in that department? So, for someone like you, reaching out to someone who's a little younger.
Well, I think in general, the way that people acquire music is completely foreign right now. When I was younger, even there was a romantic experience getting the music. You get the vinyl and looking at the grooves, and I would read the liner notes. The influence of the influence of the influence. I would, before Google, I would really study. Some people just saw a record. For me, I saw an adventure. So if there's something I really liked in a record, I wanted to see who was the producer, who did the arrangement, where was it recorded, and I had a different outlook than most kids that were buying records at the time. I wanted to study the music, and you get to feel it, touch it, see the pictures, go through. If there's booklets, you just don't get the feel on an MP3 or a downloaded song off the internet. You just don't have that anymore. I think that's why there's such a resurgence in vinyl recently. Again, it's because younger kids who never got to experience that now get it. Now they get it. It's not just about how many songs you can store on your computer. Now it's about the romance with the record. And I felt when I first got into Columbia College, I went to University of Wisconsin for 2 years. And those first 2 years, this is 1992, 94, and I was right there. We already started the rave scene, and we were when I went to Wisconsin, I kind of took that with me up there, and we brought up DJs like, Derek Carter, Diz, Mark Farina, and we would throw these parties at University of Wisconsin parties, which they didn't really have house music on the radio there, so we were kind of introducing this whole new world of music to a lot of new kids. After that, 2 years I dropped out. I partied too hard. I went to Columbia College, which kind of was a lot better for my partying ways, because it was right down my alley. I could do whatever I wanted in the city and still get away with murder and pass my classes. So when we're talking about music production, there's also that romance in producing the album. Going to a recording studio. I think there really is something to be said about the setting in a studio, especially when you're working with more than one person, working on different albums. You really acquire the knowledge of everybody in the room, which is something you just don't get in front of your sitting at home in front of your Macintosh, by yourself. There's something with techno music, house music, that's very isolated. I can understand even with that there might be, no one gets to hear. You can do whatever you want. You can sit in your underwear and make an album. I get it. But there was something really special about that. And I would have never guessed that in my time that that recording studios would be going bankrupt. The Hit Factory in New York closed. I mean, all these recording studios have gone down. It's because the technology got so good so fast and so cheap. Yeah. And a lot of people who were in that world of music had to find other ways of making money or going into different aspects of the music business, and which I kind of had to as well. And that's something that's not going to come back. We have vinyl, but the recording studio, you still need them in practical sense to go and record an album if you're a professional. But this is if you're running a professional label and you're getting paid from major labels, you can afford to do that. So now, I guess it kind of made me think about everything twice. That's when I talk to younger kids as well too. I always tell them, think twice of not what everything's happening now, but imagine what's going to happen down the line, and don't think that it can't happen, because it can. the studios now are very limited and few and far between. But as I said, there's something about that romance of sitting there and getting, like, brainstorming with other musicians, other producers. It's something that will never, music has changed forever because of that. It could be bad, it could be good, but it's something that I've noticed, and something that I've noticed in the future, that don't take anything for granted, because it can all be disappeared. I mean, who knows what it's going to be? Everyone's working at home right now on their computer, but who knows where it's going to be in 10 years?
I'm going to stay with you a little bit, because you mentioned that you also started your house music career somewhat working at Hip House Records on the north side of the Brickyard.
Right.
And so we've got another gramophone guy here.
Yeah.
That's something that's also very different. There used to be record stores all over the place,
Exactly.
big ones, large ones. People learned, people met people, people made relationships in those record stores. Talk to me a little bit about Hip House Records, the people who you got to meet, how you sort of moved along using that.
Right.
And then we're going to talk to Alejandro about his time at Gramophone.
Yeah, that's a good point too. The record store experience, that was another romance with the music. Because the record stores hired people. People had jobs, you could go work there. If you're a struggling musician, you could always work at a record store, pay for some of your bills, and do whatever and whatnot. There was at one point a lot of record stores in Chicago, and when I was like 14, 15, I was going to, because I was from the north side, my freshman year at Lane Tech, so right down at Brickyard Mile was Hip House Records. And back then, before anyone started getting really big, but guys like DJ Sneak, Fast Eddie, Ricky Gaetan Garcia, DJ Hyperactive, I mean, there was a lot of north side guys working there too as well. And, I was just hanging out there so many times, might as well get paid for it. I was working there for free anyway. I would sit up, people were asking what's top new albums, and I'd sit there for 5-6 hours working for free. And eventually they figured they'd give me a job or ban me from the store, one or the other. But they figured he's going to spend all his old paychecks here anyway, might as well hire him. So yeah, I started doing that, and it was kind of a small group. This is early 90s, and there was kind of like a fraternity within music. The Imports was still around. That was Stacy's at the Imports, etc. Was it Imports Plus? Did he change the name?
Imports, etc.
Etc. He had to change it too. So that was still around. I think Derek Carter worked there. There was Gramophone Records. There was Hot Jams, Hip House, a couple others that I might be missing. But yeah, there was a fraternity around those record stores, and we all kind of knew each other. So some guy got fired from one place, they'd go to another. I remember Derek Carter telling me he got fired from Imports 3 times before they actually told him you got to go somewhere else, and that's where he ended up at Gramophone.
Right. I mean, that's something, again, that is missing. We have Gramophone. We're going to talk to Alejandro. Craig?
I just wanted to tie in the part about the record stores. The record stores were a mentoring hub. You got to meet DJs and people that were like really moving in the industry back when you may have just been a record collector. And that was just a key point. And then another thing I wanted to touch on was the romance with the vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
Back when vinyl was, we were the same way. It was all about, going out, camaraderie with your friends and everything in the record stores. And one of the things about vinyl, which was really interesting, we took it to a whole other level, because if you were a vinyl collector, you would know that producers and remixers would leave messages scratched into the vinyl in the dead space. And we would buy the records just to see what they said and who they dedicated this to. You can't do that kind of stuff with MP3s and things like that. Another thing real quick on the records. You made a good point when you said that the industry has changed so much. People would produce a record, press it. There was a lot of time into promotion. Again, the camaraderie at the record stores, salesmen, everybody. You could really make a hit record. Today, because of the digital age and the recording studios, home recording studios, there is so much music coming out that a lot of good music is missed because the market is completely saturated. And, that's a whole nother conference, but that's why it's like the digital stores to me really don't care. It's just like, there's a whole lot that went into the vinyl and the stores, and the meeting of the people and the mentoring.
And so I'm happy to say that Alejandro here works at Gramophone Records. So maybe he is getting some of that mentoring that most people have lost, let's say, in the last couple of decades as record stores disappeared in the way they used to be sort of critical to the music genre. Alejandro is a native of Los Angeles. So again, this panel is so diverse. But he has spun at the Smart Bar, at the Spy Bar, many other places. He also owns a record label. And so you have quite a few things going on as a LA guy coming to Chicago, the birthplace of house music. How did you become involved in all of this music?
Well, coming from LA, my childhood was all about hip hop. It was like all I listened to. I would have CDs and never do my homework and just listen to hip hop. And I think that like the studying of a genre was really natural when I came to Chicago. I also just came to Chicago because I wanted to be around the music. That was kind of how I chose where I wanted to go to college, basically.
Which is the Art Institute of Chicago.
Yeah, the Art Institute of Chicago. But yeah, I mean, working at Gramophone has been great. Like the mentoring, it's funny you say like, but yeah, it's great to have all like the older cats there too, who will come in and be like digging through the bins and just throwing stuff at you. And those are the guys that, I don't know, that have mentored me the most. Just the dudes that come in and just like pull all this stuff out of the dollar bin. I mean, it makes like going sometimes like people ask what's new, what's hot, and you look at the wall of all the new music and you're like, oh, the dollar bin and the classics. That's where it's at. Like all this new shit on the wall is like just alright, I mean, but there is some cool stuff coming out. Like, yeah, you mentioned I have a record label. And there's like a lot of great record labels in Chicago too, even, that are doing great music. Yeah, I don't really remember your question.
That was it. It was about Gramophone.
Yeah.
So, listen, having the old guys there, that's something that I think is important. Again, that mentoring might be missing if, in fact, there are no small record stores and people are going to, people are buying a lot of vinyl there. But Rob McKay is a Thornwood guy. He's a South suburban guy. Again, very diverse panel here. And, certainly started his career at Columbia College, which again, you've got 4 folks here from Columbia College, so Columbia should be getting some love. They should be giving you all some honor at some point. But Columbia College, from there, you went on to tour both America and the world with both R&B and other types of music, not just house music. Talk to me, 1989, you're 21 years old, you're out of Columbia College, and you're touring. So you're touring R&B, you're touring other kinds of music. Where did house music come in? What's the love for house music, given sort of the Thornwood, South Suburban, some of the top DJs from that area are still doing phenomenal work, Grammy nominated today. How did that come about? How did the whole sort of from house to R&B and then touring the world come about for you?
Well, for me, it started with music. Growing up, I used to carry records around everywhere I went, 45s, from me being 5 years old till now. I have records in my trunk right now. But I started off as a musician, playing piano. I played percussion, clarinet, saxophone. So I was in all the high school bands and things like that. And then, it wasn't called house music. It was just something really cool that's on the radio. That's like, man, it has a particular sound, and it started drawing me in. And at that time, I really didn't have any mentors. Because growing up in the suburbs, we didn't get a chance to experience these things at that time because of age, and logistics trying to get there or whatever. So for the most part, I got the warehouse from my cousin who went to the warehouse. And he would bring home tapes, and that would draw me in more. and then we would turn on the radio and listen to Herb Kent, you know, and his radio show, the Punk Out show, you know, like punk out, punk out. So you wouldn't miss it, and you start hearing this music. And then you start going to the record store. You know, at that time, I already had a lot of records, you know, and I think around that time I started DJing. Again, like I said, I had like rhythm, you know, I was playing music, you know, I was in bands and everything. So my brother, he went to, then it was Omega School of Communication. It was kind of like before Columbia College. And he was going to broadcast school. He had all the equipment, you know, he had mixers, 2 turntables. So I just started learning from there. Again, like I said, my mentors were who I heard on the radio and Frankie Knuckles' tape. So I started listening, going out, finding the records. Of course, at that time, you know, there was a balance between disco, underground, R&B, you know, all of these records pretty much were in the house already, you know. So I just started figuring out how to live, you know, going back again, listening to Frankie tapes. And then, lo and behold, I found other people like me. I found Hula, Mahone, Maurice Joshua, who else was out there? Cash. Not so much Cash at that time. It was myself, Maurice Joshua, and Hula. And we would start doing parties out in Hazel Crest, and it was just like house parties.
What years are they? Give me those years you're in the South Suburbs.
This is like 83.
Yeah.
It was like
About 83.
We're about to be 50, June 6th. So I got a job, you know, skating rinks were big then. And I got a job at Glenwood Rotary. And I went in and I asked him, I said, man, you know, I want to play, I play records, whatever. We're like, you're going to be on the skating floor. So I was playing for skaters, you know, playing the JBs and the R&B and calling all skating backwards and couples and all this. But I kept pestering the owner, Ray, to like, yo, let me have a party. And he finally gave in, and he says, you can have a party, but in the back there's a garage. Clean out this garage, and that's where you have your party. I'm like, all right. So I would do the floor, and then on off nights, he would allow me to do parties. So the first parties that we did, they were not very good. You know, not many people came, but people knew. But this thing that was turning into house music, you know, nobody had a name for it, and people didn't always know where to find it. We did house parties, but like I said, we're teenagers, preteens. Nobody can get, you know, parents aren't driving you all the time. But then, one night, the kids from Bloom came, Bloom Trail, Rich Central, and we ended up with like 300 people in this room, and it was hot, and it was sweaty, and I was DJing, and who was DJing? This guy from Chicago Heights, Rockin' Reggie.
I love the DJ names.
You know, back in the day, DJ names were just horrible. I was Rockin' Rob, you know, it's like, God, as soon, like, and I hated that. I never, like, attached myself to it. People gave me that, and I lived with it for a while, and then I was just like, no, I'm just Rodney King. You know? So anyway, we started doing those parties, and the owner of Glenwood, he was like, yo, this is, you have something here.
You are listening to Vintage House on WNUR with DJ Lori Branch, Kevin Mega McFall, and Lauren Laurie.
So even though I was doing parties there, I was still doing parties with Hula, Maurice, and at that point, we started being able to go check out Maurice's brother, Xavier, and he was DJing at the Nimbus. The Nimbus would have teen nights, and we would go. And that's where we started hearing way more music. Actually, more Xavier, I would say, would be my mentor, because he was the person that, closest I could touch. Frankie through tapes. And so we started building a following where we got the opportunity to have a party on the actual skate floor. And at that point, we rented a system. I went to, what is the name? Making Music. And you could rent speakers, your hostess and everything. And we did the whole setup. And all of the high schools came. The first party, we probably had 700 people in Glenwood. And at that point, that's when the word started spreading throughout the South Suburban high schools. And then, like, when all of this is happening, the music is beginning to grow. Fantasy and, all of these records are coming out, and then Steve Hurley comes out, Farley. Now the radio is a part, it just starts happening, all together, So we started having these parties weekly and garnering like 1,500 people at a party. And at this time, and I'm skipping around a little bit, but then Jay Conlon, you know Jay Conlon, J&J Edits, he became part of what we were doing. We became South Suburban Rhythm Team.
I love the South Suburban stories. I hear so many things about. I love hearing the West Side stories. I love hearing the South Suburban stories. I hear a lot of North Side stories, and so I'd love to hear some of those as well. I'm gonna. When you talk about radio a little bit, I'm gonna take it to our lone woman on the panel. So happy to have her here. Maddie Higgins used to be the program manager for WNUR in Chicago as a Northwestern student. She is from the East Bay in California. So she's from California to Northwestern to the Smart Bar to writing for ChicagoMusic.org. Maddie, I learned about Maddie several different ways, but she came to my show with a group of women from all over the country being mentored at the Smart Bar. Maddie, tell me a little bit about that program, how you became involved in it, and how you became aware of house music.
Yeah, definitely. I'll start with the Smart Bar program. So the Daphne month is a month that was started by Maria Stamper, who goes by the Black Madonna, who used to be the talent buyer at Smart Bar. And she started, I believe, just last year. I don't know if you know Alejandro. But it's all month during the month of March, which is International Women's Month. They book primarily women on the roster every day of every weekend. And this year, Sam Kern, who DJs under the name Sassmat, she's a bit more of a techno head herself than Hass, but she had the idea to create this week-long workshop called Walking and Falling. And the idea was to get women identified people who were DJs and who wanted to be DJs from in Chicago. They had some women from Buffalo, someone came from Ohio, they had another person from LA. So there was kind of some of them pre-existing relationships from what I understand. And she gathered a group of people who were interested in being mentors, many of whom she had mentored herself to become DJs. And then she gathered this group of mentees, and they had a sustained week-long workshop where it was kind of all-inclusive. They went record shopping to a bunch of different record stores. They went to Gramophone, they went to Logan Hardware, they went to whoever's apartment, Sam's apartment or other people's apartment, and learned the basics of mixing. They had a workshop that they had at Smart Bar itself where it was open to anyone who could come and wanted to learn a bit about DJing on this really big, nice sound system. And so they, put together this whole week to facilitate, for women particularly, but really for anybody who just feels like they want to learn how to DJ, but they don't know where to start in terms of how to access the resources, which I think is the biggest part. and how to get involved in the community. And so my radio show coincided, so I do every other with Lauren. Lauren does 10 to 11 on Wednesdays, and I do the other 10 to 11 on Wednesdays when she and Lori are not on air. And so I offered to have them on and give them a space or a platform to kind of talk about what they wanted to do and what the intentions were. And it was an interesting thing for me because I'm very much a mentee, I think, still in my DJing career, but I'm also in the position now where I've been DJing long enough that sometimes I do act as a mentor, and so it was nice to be in there, especially we had our hour with them DJing and a little interview, and then we merged forces with Lauren and Lori and Celeste Alexander, and we kind of got to have all these women in space, just being in a space and exchanging information. And a lot of the time what I find so difficult is just getting into that space where there are all the people that you can, connect with to learn from. So that was a really cool thing. And in terms of my personal DJ path or like coming to Chicago, as I told Lauren earlier, I had bad taste in music in high school. I listened to a range of things, and like some of it was good, but a lot of it was bad, especially in terms of like the dance music realm. I didn't know anything about how house started, how techno started. I didn't know anything about the Midwest. And I moved here and I started DJing. And as I started getting into DJing, I first learned on CDJs and on MP3s, with MP3s. And being in Chicago with all these people who, there's so many people, legends who are still here. And it just made me really curious, like, okay, well, why haven't I explored the history of this more? And so I also started getting into vinyl, which completely, as we've touched on, changed the way that I thought about music when I was DJing. And that also led me to get more into house and into disco and trying to get down to the very roots of like where all this dance music came from. And so for me, I still feel like I'm just trying to swim through the history a lot of the time because I feel like there's so much to learn, there's so much to know. And with the internet and everything, it can be a lot easier to find out about things or to learn about things that you're interested in, but it can also make it more difficult in some ways, as we've talked about, because it's oversaturated, not just with music, but with, books and articles and documentaries and whatever. And so there is like a real value, I've found, and I'm sure many people would agree, there's a real value in having the person-to-person generational knowledge in addition to all that, because it really helps you put into context everything that you can learn from a book or from a documentary. It's just a lot different when you have the human touch of like a story from somebody that you know.
Jay Electro's story is exactly that. His mom was a house head, and that's why he is now a house head. So that's critical. We need that, Rob's talking about his family, bringing him into the music. Jay Electro's mom brought him into the music. Somewhat mentored by Joe Smooth, which is no small feat, and it's very serious business. Went to Jones College Prep and recently graduated from Columbia College. Love that. And so he's DJ'd already at the Silver Room in Wrigleyville, all sort of before the age of 21, which I think is fantastic. Talk to me a little bit about if you think have you been mentored? Do you think you're still being mentored? Are people reaching out to you? Talk to me a little bit about your experience as a musician, as an artist, and how you're being mentored.
Well, I give much thanks to Joe Smooth for, I was like a 12-year-old kid when he dropped all these like music programs on me. So I give tremendous thanks to him above all. But I feel I'm getting more mentorship now that I'm older and over 21 than I did. Since it was really hard to get in the clubs, being under 21 and knowing how to make music and being a DJ, because you have to be over 21 to DJ most places. So I think that's the hardest part of being under 21. And being
I think Alejandro mentioned a little bit about sort of what he thought about the clubs, if the clubs were supporting a little bit. Maybe you all can sort of dialogue a little bit about that. Alejandro, tell me what you sort of mentioned about playing at some of the clubs or maybe playing in different types of places in this town.
Well, I just had motor friends that were okay, you can have the early slot, and I was playing at primary when I just got here. I was only 18. But I was playing to an empty room, but it was a great experience, and I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate that it's so strict. Nightlife, I mean, you can't go out after 21, but, I mean, just gotta get a fake ID. That's what I tell you. You have to do it. I mean, it's worth it. If you really love the music, if you gotta see it, you gotta have it, you're gonna find a way. I did.
Right.
That seemed to be the biggest difference in my mind that I've experienced as like a young person coming into clubs and stuff, is just how much I hear about how involved high schoolers were in the development of all this, and how different it could be, you know, now if things weren't as strict. Just like giving young people more of a creative space to like explore things and create new ideas, and not saying, you know, I mean, even 18 would be better, but it's,
You know, that's like exactly what you just said about the teens. We actually kind of mentored each other.
right.
And we had safe spaces to do that in. The problem with what you have here in Chicago right now is having safe places for teens to go. And see, house music was, you know, that was love. It was all about love. And yeah, again, we all mentored each other. And because we were all young, growing up and growing into the music at the same time, you know, that was a beautiful thing. I just wish that in today's society, we could, it's all about how we bring the young people back to, you know, into house music. It's real hard to do that, like you said, because it's so strict. You know, we were sneaking into the warehouse back then. You know, we had the fake IDs. We were supposed to be 21, but we weren't, you know. But again, it's having the spaces that will allow kids to come in and experience house music. And all the clubs that are out here now is like real strict, hip hop, 21, that's it. And they don't have safe places to go.
But the thing is, when I think about something that Rob said, you know, he went to the places and says, look, I want to DJ at your place. You know, what can I do here? What can I do there? You know, would that be the same? Do you think, is that at all something that is sort of missing and not happening now, like people are being more aggressive? Or are you thinking that the clubs are not going to allow it because they would lose their licenses and things like that, they wouldn't allow you to do things? But could you DJ at the Silver Room? Could you DJ at the festival? Can you do some other things like that? I think that Jay Electro was mentioning a little bit about that as well. Like, he's been playing Wrigleyville places, even as an underage person, but you got to get in there and ask to do it.
See, I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for young people right now in the scene. It's just, there's just a complete war on fun for teenagers right now. It is just, I've never seen it like that. There's just no out. When we were kids, and they're a little older, but still at the tail end of my generation, teen clubs were everywhere. There was a market. There's still a market for it, but the politicians who control it now, it's such a, you know, everyone's worried about liability, and if something happens, if there's a drug overdose, so teens are bad. You can't have, even though there's, you know, way more problems with bars and, you know, fights and whatnot. Teen clubs reduced. I mean, we essentially, and I was at the tail end of it. You know, I got to experience going to Medusa's and you know, going to other teen clubs, which I guess by the mid '90s were already, you know, fading away. But we also took, when we started the rave scene here, you know, none of us were 21. I started DJing in a nightclub, but it was a gay nightclub called Foxy's, and that's where Derek Carter and Spencer Kinsey, Miles Van, and myself, we all kind of started there. But that was the only place that would book anyone that was under 21. So we had to go and do it ourselves. And when I started the rave scene in Chicago, I was looking at what was happening overseas. Overseas, obviously, it's 18 and up to get in. So they didn't have these issues of getting into places. So we decided to throw our own events. And I'm at 18 with some other friends who are all around the same age, all under 21, with, you know, we're paying off police districts and renting out warehouses with $30,000 budgets, and we didn't even know we thought this was normal. This is like something we got to do to make our own fun. And I think that's something, you know, and it has to do with the city of Chicago now, the price of living. There's it's gone up, you know, like you can't find a neighborhood where you could throw a party and no one's gonna complain. Now it's gentrified. You know, now you have snobby people living in, you know, where we used to have 2,000-3,000 people partying till 5-6 in the morning, you know, in a warehouse district. Now there's a row of McMansions there. And so you don't have an option of finding places in the city of Chicago to do events too, so they kind of handcuff each other. And the politicians went after Mayor Daley's niece had an issue at one party. Then they put the rave bill, which was the crack house bill, which is a $50,000. If they find any drug paraphernalia, everyone gets a $50,000 fine and possible jail time, from the owner of the building to the promoter to the sound guy to the DJ to the guy parking the cars outside. And that killed it. And that was 2002, and it hasn't been the same since.
One of the things, another problem we were talking about, the DJs today, and I might get in trouble for this, but a lot of the DJs today don't have the same mentality as far as the ones back in the day of mentoring.
So you must expound on that.
Yeah, what I mean by that is a lot of the DJs, a lot of older guys are, you know, they don't want to seem to give the younger DJs a chance. You know, it's like almost not being confident in the position that they have. I mean, DJing and having a residency in a club can be a cutthroat business. I mean, you know, you did a lot to get there, and, you know, that could be your bread and butter, and you're not trying to let anybody else come in. You know, but it gets to a point in your life when you succeed at what you do and you're comfortable where you are. Like I tell people all the time, I have no problems bringing, a lot of people ask me when I do events, they say, how come you opening up? I was like, dude, I've had my 15 minutes of fame. I've done that, been there, done more than you can even imagine. So if I can set the tone for a party and bring someone new in behind me, you know, I'm more than willing to do that. You know, they could bring something fresh to what we have. And the number one thing is we need to get the youth involved in what we're doing. If we don't, it will all die with all our old asses. Excuse me. You know, and we don't want house music to be an era. You know, era music. We want it to continue. You know, but that's one of the problems I see, that some of the DJs and some of the people that have the powers to be just don't want to give the younger person a chance to come in.
Which I'm happy you brought up, and I didn't have to ask that type of question. So you, as a pioneer, are discussing the fact that there might be some disconnect from some of the older generation to the newer generation, simply because it's a natural sort of response to be protective of what you do.
Exactly.
To a certain degree. However, you know, when you think back about house music history, I like to look at examples like Gene Hunt, who Ron Hardy and Frankie Knuckles, him as a teenager, bringing him into the club with his mother's permission to spend.
You know, exactly. You know, to be honest with you, I would not be here if Frankie didn't feel comfortable in himself to say, I want you to open up. You know, and one of the things that later on down the line, you know, Frankie and I were extremely close. And one day I just asked him, I said, how come you let me open up for you? What, you know, it's like the reason, because he said, you were a very good DJ and you make me work. He said, you make me work. I have to think about what I have to do next coming behind you. And, you know, like I say, no one, without him, you know, just saying, you know, instead of just being, oh, I'm Frankie Knuckles and, you know, this is my show, it's always going to be his show. But to allow him to allow me to come in and do something like that. A lot of DJs, and you know, Ron, if you, like you mentioned before, a lot of people don't know, I played at the Music Box. And that was just one time, though. And what happened was Ron and Robert had left out the DJ booth, and I was a young kid then. I was sitting in the DJ booth, and I would go down and see Ron, and the record was about to go off. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I don't work here, you know, this is not my club, you know, I was working for the power plant then. It was kind of a little rivalry, so I'm sitting there and I was like, but this place is jam-packed, this record's finna go off, what do I do? Right, so I got up and I just mixed the record. As soon as I was mixing, Ronnie comes upstairs, saw me mixing, and turned around and went back. He said, okay, and turned around and went back downstairs. And I didn't see him until 4 o'clock that morning when the party was over. But you know what I'm saying? These things, you know, people don't do that anymore, you know.
But what happened to the DJ battle? I mean, how come we can't do an old school, new school DJ battle? That used to happen a lot. People weren't afraid to battle each other. Women were allowed to battle men, that type of thing. How can we bring that back? Can we bring that back?
Real quick, let me just tie that into like the record stores. Back in the day when we did a DJ battle, it was like, say for instance, if I was going to battle Rob, me and Rob were friends. You know what I'm saying? We met in the store or Dave, you know, we all hang out. But because of the divide, which is, I call it the digital divide, most people are at home doing their own thing, no camaraderie. You only know that DJ for Facebook, and half the times the DJs go out to hear other DJs to just sit up there and critique what he did, or I could have did that mix better, or why did he do that? It's not the same. You know, we could have a DJ battle and it could turn into something totally wrong. You know what I'm saying? It would turn into something totally wrong, where back in the day, you know, if Rob won, you know, we still go get drunk, say, good job, man. I could have got you on that one. You know what I'm saying? But you can't do that. You can't do that today.
And that, back then, the battle was a way to hone your skills, too.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I appreciate your comment about work. He says it makes me work harder.
Oh, yeah.
And that's critical, you know, to get better. So if we're not getting better, you know, what are we doing? And so is Chicago getting better? Are we getting better? Are we, you know, what do you think? We got the city of Chicago, you know, attempting to do more, battling a little bit with the movement.
I would say Chicago is taking major steps, and I truly appreciate it, for Chicago, the way Chicago is finally accepting house music as a real genre of music. You know, you go overseas, you know, a couple of years ago, you would go overseas, and you say you're from Chicago, it's blues, jazz, house. You come back home, the powers that be look at you like you're crazy. What are you talking about? You know, but you go anywhere else, they all know, oh, house music. They may not be able to say anything in English, because they house music. Chicago, house music, you know. But I think right now, in this day and age, look at this, you know, the cultural center, people doing things to bring an awareness to house music. I think it's a great thing, great time for Chicago.
I think, too, when we talk about the awareness of house music, most people have their music on SoundCloud. I'm not quite sure how everyone is marketing themselves in the music industry. How do people hear about other people? And how are we using each other to market each other? How are we using our own music, what we're doing to market Chicago as the birthplace of this music? You know, I was talking to Jay Electro, and Jay Electro was saying that he's coming out with a few new tunes. He's got some things on SoundCloud. He's working on some things. How are you getting that out? And is anyone helping you? You know, who's helping you get your music out there to the world as a Chicago artist?
Well, first, Jerry King's my distributor. So like I got to know Jerry King through my mom. So like he distributes, my mom does music too. So we both do music, and he like distributes it to places like Beatport and track stores, for which people like they go to the site to buy music. But like the business of buying music these days is really like is really tricky, because there's a lot of people that don't want to buy music. They can just go to YouTube or rip it illegally off the internet and just listen to it that way.
One thing that's missing is a place to, like, it's like a litmus test. Like back in the day, I could go, so I was part of a group called Escape Free. And we had this song called Don't You Know. We didn't know if it was going to be anything. We knew and enjoyed it, you know. So we took it to the box. I've been to the box 3 times in my life. And I went, myself and Candace, we went and we gave the record to them. Ron played it, and we were excited. Then Ron played it again, and we were like,
Right.
then he played it again. Then he played a couple of records, then he played it again. And we knew at that point that that was going to be something. But you don't have DJs share music with other DJs. You go hear a DJ and he's playing all his own shit.
Yeah.
You know, but how do you expand the music if you don't share the music? You know, and that's one of the flaws that I see right now.
So Craig's got some exciting things happening, and we have to talk about that if we're talking about what the future of music is. What's happening, Craig?
One of the things we were talking about is not having a place. I have been a strong advocate of that and always preached. One of the reasons house music is where it is because we don't have what I call a tempo to deliver it in. And it goes back to your music. You know, we can all hear music, but we have no place to experience it. That was the difference back in the day. The music box, and I know there's been other places up north, like Medusa's, that was a good place too, where you could, it was a music box, Medusa's, the power plant, even the warehouse. The sound systems, lighting systems, the whole atmosphere allowed you to experience the music and not just listen to it. It's a big difference. So it also, like you say, with sales and distribution and things, you can put out a new song and you can have all distribution everywhere. But it'll get lost in the market because DJs aren't sharing music. There's nowhere really you can go to say, you know, here, could you play this? Because see, back in the day, you know, a lot of people always try to connotate the music box and the warehouse, and the music box and the power plant with classic music. We were cutting edge, just like Rob said. Every time Chippy, Steve Hurley, you know, anybody, Jamie Principal, would bring us a track that they did last night, we would be playing, and if we liked it, it was the next thing on the tables. You know, immediately. You know, and DJs don't do that anymore. It's not like, you know, they don't trust the artist or even, and again, it's back to sharing. But I'm saying all this to say, I'm opening up a club. My friends and I decided to come together and do a space that would allow you to experience music again here in Chicago. My VIP grand opening is this Saturday. It's called Club Experience, EXP, and it's 7313 South Cottage Grove. It is something like you've never seen before on the south side of Chicago. The sound system will be second to none. I will tell you that now. And what we designed it for was so that artists could come and DJs and allow people to experience music again, because that's something that's missing.
But I think that's important, but even more important is the second thing you want to do with that space.
The other thing is, the name of my organization is BMMI, Backdoor Music Mentoring, Inc. What we're doing is we're setting up programs for teens, youth, everything, and even older people that just want to learn. We will be teaching all the musical software that's out there right now for digital music and things like that to offer these kids an alternative to the streets. And that program will be kicking off in about 2 weeks. But it's also housed in the same spot where we have the club. So one side is the music mentoring program and the other side is the club itself.
Which is so important. Thank you.
Thank you. Just hit me up on Facebook. If anybody's interested in coming, look for me on Facebook and just RSVP, and you're more than welcome to come on down this Saturday.
So I'm going to also bring it back to women DJs. We got one lone woman DJ on the panel here. I do a radio show with DJ Lori Branch, one of the pioneers of house music, who happened to be a woman. One of the things that struck me in a panel discussion we had some time ago, we had DJ First Lady Celeste Alexander, Lori, a bunch of other folks from the 80s talk. They said each of them gave a mentor, and 3 of the 5 mentioned a gentleman named Andre Hatchett. DJ Andre Hatchett, whether he knew it or not, created a generation of women DJs. And many of them did not say there was somebody else who helped it. Andre Hatchett was the one that put them on the decks first, that talked to them first, said you could do it first, that type of thing. So I am in love with the Smart Bar and the program that's happening there. Is that going to happen again? How can people find out more about it?
I'm hoping so. So Sam said that they were trying to do it again in October, and you can find me after if you want her contact info. She unfortunately couldn't be here today. But I think part of the idea, I mean, both with Daphne and with this, week that happened inside of it, is not to just isolate it to that 1 month and to make it something that's more continuous, both in terms of it was great having so many women DJing during March, but I haven't seen that many on the Smart Bar lineup since then. So it's kind of you can't just sort of pay a nod, to it and then say, okay, we've done our duty. Something that struck me earlier when you guys were talking about people not wanting to give other people a chance or to mentor. I think it's a bit different with women because there's so few of us that when we do meet other women DJs, it's just a lot more immediate, wanting to develop a relationship, wanting to develop a mentorship. And all of us want to see more women DJing and want to see more women on lineups, and so it's a little bit different there. Just because it can be so refreshing to be okay, there are this many women DJs out there. And it's also different with my generation because now we have older generations of women who DJ, and so you get more of a generational thing. But at the same time, just like a lot of those, are you talking about the SimFest panel that happened a year ago? Yeah, that was great. Just like a lot of them, many of I would only really look to one guy as one person as someone who's mentored me in terms of giving me opportunities and stuff like that, if not, literal, this is how you DJ. And it was a guy. So it's hard to, you can't pick and choose who your mentors are going to be and stuff like that. And Michael Serafini, who owns Microphone, is the person who has given me opportunities. He gave me an opportunity to play at my favorite party at Smart Bar. Every time I go to the store, he knows what I like. He picks out stuff for me. He gives it to me. He asks me what I think of the things that he picked out. He's very attentive, and I know that he seemed like a similar figure to Andre, where I'm not the only person who feels that way about him, and I know he gives a lot of young people jobs at Gramophone, like Alejandro, stuff like that. So I don't know, it's hard to say. I really wish that I had a woman to mentor me, and I know a lot of other women feel the same, just because it can be a bit less intimidating when you're first trying to learn. That was something else that was touched on earlier, that Dave was talking about, nobody just goes into the studio and sits with a group and does this stuff anymore. And I think that I totally agree that that's very valuable, but I think in terms of the, people being able to do things independently with technology, it gives people who, women, may not feel as encouraged.
Thanks for listening to the Vintage House Show podcast. Please subscribe and share, and check us out live, WNUR 89.3 FM, Wednesdays at 10 o'clock.